Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye appoints a number of new ministers as she looks to make one final push to ensure her policy goals are pushed through before she leaves office. South Korea rebounds to the 11th largest economy in the world in 2015, but its rise up the rankings is only because its economy contracted less than the others around it. Plus some ups, but mostly downs for Team Korea on day 10 of the 2016 Olympics in Rio. We have all the latest from Brazil. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Tuesday, the 16th of August. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. I'm Mark Broom. We are going to begin at the nation's top office. President Park Geun-hye has announced a widely expected cabinet reshuffle. The president hopes the fresh faces will help her implement her policy initiatives for the remaining 18 months of her term. For a closer look at the new ministers, Song Ji-sun reports.
President Park is gearing up for another push to implement her policy initiatives. A day after her Liberation Day speech, the president announced a partial cabinet reshuffle aimed at advancing her creative economy and culture's prosperity drives. Cho Yun-sun, President Park's former Secretary for Political Affairs and a former Gender Equality Minister, has been appointed to lead the Culture Ministry. The presidential office of Cheongwa says it has great expectations for her, as Cho has a deep understanding of President Park's policy initiatives after having served as one of the president's closest aides for years.
With her ample experience working for the government and at the National Assembly, we expect Cho will contribute to the advancement of cultural prosperity in the arts, content development, tourism, and sports.
Kim Jae-soo, the current chief of the state-run Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation, has been appointed the new agriculture minister. Cho Kyung-gyu, deputy director of the Office for Government Policy Coordination, will now lead the environment ministry. The two positions were widely expected to have fresh appointments, as the ministers had been in their positions since President Park's inauguration, leaving Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se as the only cabinet member to have maintained his post. The president also named new personnel at vice ministerial level. President Park's current Trade Secretary Chung Man-gi is the new first Vice Minister for Trade, and Agriculture Secretary Chung Hwang-gun will now serve as the Chief of the Rural Development Administration. The ministerial appointees will all go through parliamentary hearings, though parliamentary approval is not a must and will take office in early September as the 20th National Assembly kicks off its next regular session. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now staying with domestic politics, but in the parliamentary arena, and a two-week-long parliamentary session has kicked off at the National Assembly. It did so earlier today. The rival parties and the public are hoping for some tangible results by the end of the month, but many expect a bumpy road ahead as a number of contentious issues have to be resolved. Our National Assembly correspondent Ji Myung-gil with the details.
After a prolonged period of gridlock and inaction, Korea's major political parties have pledged to work together and pass bills aimed at improving the day-to-day lives of the people.
The National Assembly will work hard to live up to the public's expectations and bring about fruitful results.
The Special Parliamentary Committee on Budget and Accounts has begun its review of the government's supplementary budget plan. The ruling's Haenuri party is calling for all sides to show a cooperative spirit, while the opposition parties have vowed to keep their promises to the people by focusing on enhancing their lives. Last week, the rival parties agreed to vote on the multi-billion-dollar extra budget bill next Monday. The extra funds will be used to invigorate Korea's sluggish economy in the latter part of this year. Apart from the budget supplement, the parties are expected to lock horns over parliamentary hearings on the managerial failures of Korea's ailing shipbuilders. They plan to look into the root causes of the industry's financial woes and discuss the presidential office's involvement in a state-run bank's decision to inject billions of dollars to struggling Daewoo shipbuilding and marine engineering. Jimyong-gil, Arirang News.
Now, the U.S. Army's Chief of Staff is set to visit Seoul for a briefing on the deployment of the U.S. THAAD missile defense system in South Korea. A statement released by the U.S. Army says General Mark Milley will visit Seoul, Beijing and Tokyo over the next one-week period. South Korea's defense ministry says the four-star general is scheduled to arrive in Seoul on Wednesday for a three-day visit. Milley is also set to meet with South Korean military leaders and visit the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division to discuss the U.S. Army unit's relocation to Camp Humphreys in Pyeongtaek, south of Seoul. In Beijing, General Milley plans to discuss THAAD with senior figures in the Chinese military who are deeply opposed to the deployment. He's expected to emphasize that THAAD is being deployed solely to counter North Korea's growing missile threats. South Korea's economy has been on a turbulent ride in recent years, with exports sagging and key industries suffering. But, as our Kim Mok-yeon reports, South Korea actually rose on the world GDP rankings in 2015 when compared with other economies.
Local investment banks revealed Tuesday that data by the World Bank shows South Korea's gross domestic product reached $1.38 trillion in 2015. That makes South Korea the 11th largest economy in the world. South Korea's GDP rank hit 10th in 2005, but had fallen back to 15th by 2008. Between 2009 and 2013, South Korea remained at 14th. From 2014, it started to bounce back, climbing one notch to 13th, and finally climbed two notches back to 11th last year. However, the results don't mean South Korea's economy actually grew, as Russia and Australia's economies in 10th and 12th respectively in 2004 contracted last year. Experts say South Korea's GDP last year actually dropped 2.4% from $1.41 trillion in 2014, and its gross national income per capita at purchasing power parity dropped 6 notches to 48. An investment strategy manager from Seoul-based High Investment and Securities said that though it's difficult to read too much into the rise of South Korea's GDP rank, it's possible to say South Korea's economy did relatively well compared to other countries. The United States topped the GDP list with almost $18 trillion, followed by China, Japan, and Germany and Britain. Kim Mok-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, over half of the companies listed on Korea's benchmark Kospi fared pretty well in the second quarter of 2016. According to market researcher Wise FN and Hyundai Securities, 80 out of 158 firms that reported second quarter earnings as of last Friday posted operating profits exceeding market estimates in the April to June period. Earnings surprises were led by tech companies, shipbuilders, chemicals manufacturers and oil refiners. Samsung Electronics turned out its biggest quarterly operating profit in over 2 years, driven by strong sales of its latest smartphone and cost-cutting efforts. With major companies posting positive results, the combined operating profit of all listed companies is estimated to have surpassed the 40 trillion won mark. That's about $36.4 billion for the first time ever. Local prosecutors investigating the emissions scandal that's engulfed Volkswagen are planning to summon the president of the German car maker's local unit. They say Thomas Kuhl, who has been in charge of importing Volkswagen and Audi cars to Korea since 2013, may have been involved in forging test results on engine noise levels, fuel efficiency and emissions to secure approval from local authorities. The move comes a few days after Johannes Thammer, managing director of Audi Volkswagen Korea, was summoned by the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office for questioning as a suspect. Kuhl may be summoned as a testifier, but depending on the probe, he could be summoned as a suspect as well. The Korean government banned sales and revoked certifications of 80 Volkswagen AG models on August 2nd. Now, Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee, has outlined his plan for combating Islamic terrorism. which includes an ideological screening of prospective immigrants to the US. Oseong reports.
Donald Trump has called for an extreme vetting of future immigrants to the US, drawing inspiration from the Cold War era. Speaking in the swing state of Ohio on Monday, the Republican nominee laid out his plans to combat radical Islamic terrorism, pledging to screen visa applicants with an ideological test and reject those who don't embrace American values. He said there would also be a temporary suspension of immigration from some of the most dangerous and volatile places in the world. Describing the defeat of Islamic terrorism as one of his key policies, Trump called for new alliances, namely with Egypt, Israel, Jordan, and even Russia. He also reversed an earlier statement that suggested the US wouldn't fulfill its obligations to NATO.
We will also work very closely with NATO on this new mission. I had previously said that NATO was obsolete because it failed to deal adequately with terrorism. Since my comments, they have changed their policy and now have a new division focused on terror threats. Very good. Very, very good.
During his speech, Trump accused the Democratic Party of creating a vacuum to let terrorism grow and thrive, and branded President Obama as an incompetent leader, blaming him for the rise of ISIS and Islamic terrorism. He also lashed out against his Democratic rival Hillary Clinton, saying she lacks the mental and physical stamina to take on ISIS. These statements are the latest in a series of controversial remarks by the Republican nominee on radical Islam, which began last year with his call to ban all Muslims from entering the US. Trump has faced sinking poll numbers this week, falling significantly behind Clinton in key swing states. The latest poll from CBS found that Clinton is leading Trump by 14 points in Colorado, 13 points in Virginia, and 9 points in North Carolina. Oseong, Arirang News.
Now, this July was the hottest month in recorded history. According to NASA, July 2016 was 0.84 degrees Celsius hotter than the 1951 to 1980 average, and that is 0.11 degrees above the previous records set in July 2011 and July 2015, which were, until now at least, tied for the hottest month on record. Scientists say much of the heat was trapped by greenhouse gases, while El Niño increased global temperatures this year. A record-breaking El Niño was declared in June, but global temperatures lagged by a couple of months. Experts worry that temperatures will continue to rise even though the residual heat from the El Niño has died away. Right, well, let's turn our focus to the latest from the 2016 Olympics in Rio, now firmly into its final week, and Team Korea suffered some defeats in badminton and table tennis on Monday, sports they had been hoping to land some medals in. Although it wasn't all doom and gloom, though. For the details, let's turn to our Ian Shin, who continues to follow the pulse of the sporting action in Rio for us. So Monday, Ian Shin, Day 10, Monday, was quite the roller coaster ride for Team Korea, but not in a particularly enjoyable or fun way.
Sounds about right, Mark. Day 10 wasn't exactly kind to Team Korea as the nation suffered some bitter losses in fields in which they had high medal hopes. In the semifinal of men's team table tennis, Korea was taken apart 3-1 by a seemingly invincible Chinese team. It was an incredibly tough match with Korea's Chang Young-sik and Lee-Sang-soo and Ju Se-hyuk facing three of the world's top 4 players. China's Ma Long, the world's best player who also won gold in this year's individual event, wasted no time putting Korea's Ju Se-hyuk away 3-0 in their game. China is now well on its way to sweep all table tennis golds for the 3rd consecutive Olympics. South Korea still has a shot at a medal, though. The team will play the bronze medal match against Germany on Wednesday local time. And that was only one of the fields where the country saw disappointing losses. In the men's doubles badminton, the top-ranked team of Lee Yong-dae and Yoo Yeon-sung suffered an unexpected defeat in the quarterfinals. The Malaysian duo upset the Koreans 2-1, and the loss was especially surprising considering the Malaysians are ranked 12th. The other Korean pair, Kim Sa-rang and Kim Ki-jung, ranked 3rd in the world, also crashed out in the round of 16 with a loss to China. In the third and final set, a Korean team had a match point leading 20-18, but the Chinese athletes dragged themselves back into the contest, eventually winning the set 24-22, sending them through the final semis. But there was some good news on Monday in women's team badminton. Korea's double team of Chung Kyung-eun and Shin Seung-chun beat a duo from the Netherlands 2-1 to secure a semi-final berth. And they're now set to face off against Japan on Tuesday. Moving on to women's gymnastics, with 3 Olympic golds already in the bag after some dazzling moves on the mat, America's Simone Biles has snagged yet another medal in Rio, but it wasn't the color she's used to. On Monday, the 19-year-old who had been eyeing a 4th gold had to settle for a bronze in the women's individual balance beam final. During her routine, Biles slipped after doing a front tuck and had to grab the beam to rebalance herself, which ended up costing her. And with that, the gold went to Sanne Wevers of the Netherlands. And finally, an athlete from one of the most isolated places in the world took home gold on Monday. North Korea's Lee Se-kwang, the 2-time world vault champion, claimed first place in the men's vault event with a score of 15.691 points. It's his first Olympic gold medal and North Korea's second in Rio. During the awarding ceremony, Chang-won, who is only North Korea's member of the International Olympic Committee, handed the gold to Ri. And with that, let's take a look at the schedule for some of the upcoming events on Tuesday.
Well, on that note, that's where we're going to leave it on this Tuesday afternoon here in Seoul. But for our viewers in Korea, the nation's weather agency has issued a heat wave warning for almost the entire country, so do take the necessary precautions. Have a great day, and if you're in Korea, stay cool. Until next time, goodbye.